Hey team, and welcome back to our basic series, and today I want to talk to you a bit about the sun sign. So you probably know what your sun sign is, you know whether you're Pisces or you're Sagittarius or what have you, and you know that it has something to do with the day that you were born. But what exactly is a sun sign, how is it determined, and why do we have it? So the sun sign is just the sign of the zodiac that the sun occupied on the day that you were born, which is why you often will look it up based on your birthday. Throughout the year, the sun appears to move throughout the zodiac, and basically, whatever day you're born on, we kind of stop the clock, and whatever sign the sun is in is, then becomes your sun sign or is denominated as your sun sign. Sort of like I was talking about in the first video where we talked about how to read circular charts. The reason why those circular form charts are preferred and popular now is because we conceptualize the zodiac and the sky as a whole as a circle that surrounds the Earth. This big circle is of course then divided into these little subsections. The most popular one is the 12 signs of the zodiac, which takes our big circle and kind of divides it up into these smaller sections, much like we divide our year into 12 calendar months. When we say things like March, that brings to mind certain imagery, certain like weather patterns, kind of what temperature it may be, or activities that you probably would do outside during that time of year. And it's kind of the same thing with zodiac signs. If we say like Aries, there are certain qualities or images that that sign evokes to astrologers that we then interpret or assign qualities, characteristics, or things to. Very basically, ancient astrologers realized that the sun, moon, and visible planets all kind of moved throughout this very narrow band of the sky, which they then called the zodiac. There are certain constellations that fall within the zodiac that the planets all seem to kind of pass over as they move around the circle. Over time, the zodiac was organized and structured in such a way to be composed of 12 signs of 30 degrees each, in kind of the same way that we have 12 calendar months of roughly 30 days each. This development mainly occurred as for ease of recording, to be able to tell more accurately or tell people more accurately where certain planets were on any given day at any given time. So basically all throughout the year, all these planets are moving throughout all these signs, but then when you're born, we just kind of stop the clock, and that is, given where the planets fall at that time, then is your birth chart. Today we put a big emphasis on the sun sign because it is the easiest planetary position to know. It's based on your birthday, and this is because the way that the zodiac is structured is that it's based on the Earth-Sun relationship, which means that the sun will be back in the same part of the zodiac during the same time every year. And this is why you see some of those calendar dates with the zodiac signs, like the sun will be in Aries between March 21st to around April 21st, and then in Taurus from April 21st to like May 21st, and that kind of thing. So the sun sign is very popularly known because it does not require kind of full astrological chart calculation, which may require information that some people do not know or do not have, such as birth time or even birth location. This, of course, was very helpful when it came to commodifying or commercializing and popularizing astrology in the early 20th century. As astrology started to make its move into print media like newspapers and women's magazines, it needed some kind of hook to get people invested and interested. So the idea of utilizing the sun sign, which is something that anybody could know just based on their birthday, to categorize and talk to people a little bit more individually, became a big hit. So because of this focus on the sun sign for almost the last 100 years, you'd probably think that the sun sign is the most important or one of the most important aspects of an individual's astrological chart. Well, not really. In truth, many people will not identify very strongly with characteristics associated with their sun sign, partly because they have become somewhat stereotyped over the years, but also because the sun and its sign are really just kind of one part of an astrological chart and of a person. And if you're somebody who has, seen your astrological chart and seen how it's laid out, and you know that the sun is just one point within it, with among 7 or 10 other points. What is more likely to accurately represent somebody is the sign on their ascendant, the planet that rules that sign, and the sign that that planet is then placed in. These three things are more likely to come together to paint a better picture of an individual than just their sun sign alone. That's not to say that there are people who do not identify with their sun sign. Of course, there are people who will and who do, and there could be a lot of reasons for that, particularly people who are born in the early morning pre-dawn hours, also individuals who may have Leo rising, or people who might have the sun in the same sign as the planet that rules their ascendant. So there are all kinds of different conditions to where somebody may lean more heavily into characteristics associated with their sun sign. But for many people, it just won't be that big of an influence, especially compared to some other much more important and personal things. But does that then mean that the sun sign is completely unimportant? No, of course not. It's important. It's another planet that's worth considering. There's also a lot of talk about how the sun represents the soul in astrology, and how that is something that makes it a more prominent planet than some of the other planets, and so therefore maybe needs to be considered a bit more heavily. And personally, I think that is probably that is accurate. That is an accurate statement to say that the sun represents the soul in an astrology chart. But I think that there's a problem then of equating a person's soul with their personality and how they act, and just kind of like a weakness or a watering down of Western metaphysics, because I don't think that the soul of me is the thing that I project out to people in like a personality or like a caricature in some way. And so I think there's a weakness there in how we kind of structure the metaphysics of astrology, which is kind of beyond the scope of this video, I guess, but just kind of like something worth considering, an opinion of mine that I think is worth keeping in the back of your mind as you kind of navigate some of these conversations about where people are, like where somebody's personality is, or where somebody, like where different parts of somebody is in a chart, and how you find that and what that might mean for somebody. So the sun sign is just the sign of the zodiac that the sun occupied on the day that you were born. And it's sort of like sharing your birth month with someone. So you'd say, oh, I was born in April. And then we would know, okay, you're either an Aries or you're a Taurus, depending on what day in April you were born. You can get more specific and look and see what specific degree of the zodiac that your sun is in. And that is a bit more like sharing your exact birth date with somebody. And so saying you were born in April, and then you'd be either an Aries or a Taurus, you could say, oh, I was born April 13th. And then we would know that you're an Aries. And I think that's around like 22 degrees Aries. On that day. But that's not just to say that just the sun has its own sign and degree. All of the planets will have their own zodiacal positions as well. It's just for them, you can't know it just by knowing the birth date, because their relationships with the zodiac is a little bit different than the sun's, who is more unique and special, really. The sun's motion throughout the zodiac is very uniform and steady, so it's easy for us to kind of keep it to a certain rhythm and know where he'll be on specific days. But the other planets, they speed up, they slow down, they turn back around, and it just becomes kind of impossible and overly complicated to kind of inform people in any sort of like general fashion, the way you can kind of create a calendar for it. Like with sun signs, like you can't do that with everybody else, really. So hopefully this has helped you kind of understand a little bit more about zodiacal mechanisms, how planets move a little bit, and how we kind of talk about it and measure it in some extent, because it's something that you'll use all the time, or you'll refer back to all the time, especially as you move more forward in interpreting and reading astrological charts, where you'll have to look and see what different signs and degrees different planets are before you're able to interpret them. So everybody take care, and I will see you guys in the next video, where we're actually going to kind of take a step back and return to looking at charts to look at a little bit more about how to determine aspects.